I'm very happy to welcome you to the Economic Club of Indiana and to the first event of an outstanding lineup of speakers for our 2021 season. Thank you all for joining us today. This is the place to be challenged by leading speakers and advance great ideas collectively. My name is Kathy Langham, and I am President and CEO of Langham Logistics. I'm also very honored to serve as President of the Economic Club of Indiana for the current season. Before introducing today's guest, I'd like to take a moment to thank our outstanding group of Platinum sponsors that were highlighted at the beginning of today's webinar and also on the virtual banners behind me. Thank you. Last season, many of our luncheons were the top trending events on Twitter. Let's keep it going by expanding today's conversation through social media. So, if you haven't already, get out your phones now and post, tweet, or like us so that all your friends will know you're involved with the Economic Club of Indiana. Our Twitter handle is @EconomicClubIN, and we're also using the hashtag EconLunch. Now, it is my great honor to introduce today's speaker, the leadoff speaker for the season, Tom Linebarger. Tom has been Chairman and CEO of Cummins since 2012. He has held many leadership roles in his 25+ years at the company. So he joined Cummins in 1993 after interning on the manufacturing line at the Cummins Midrange Engine plant in Walesboro, Indiana. Based in Columbus, Indiana, Cummins is the world's largest independent maker of diesel engines and related products. With a mission of making people's lives better by powering a more prosperous world, Cummins not only invests in enhancing its product portfolio, but also its people. This mission has served as the foundation guiding Cummins' response under Linebarger's leadership to the current world events like the pandemic. Please join me in welcoming Tom Linebarger.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you. And it's really an honor and a pleasure to be here. I do want to join Kathy in thanking the sponsors for this event. It is a really important forum, and the ideas that are shared here have a really positive impact on the discourse in Central Indiana, the leadership discourse, as well as just ideas from me about how to run an organization more effectively. And of course, it wasn't the quality of the food that made those lunches great. It was the quality of the people participating. So your continuation of sponsorship in this environment is really valuable to the community. So thank you very much. And Kathy and the Economic Club, it's really nice to be back. I realize it's the first time I've worn a collared shirt in a little while. So if nothing else, at least it got me to dress properly. And I would just say that I'm honored and pleased to do it in this forum. I am my own IT manager, so that creates risks for all of us about whether this thing will go well, but let's give it a shot and see how we go. So let's move on to the next one. I'll start with an introduction of myself, just so you know who's speaking to you and where I started and where I come from. This first picture is my mom and my brother and I. I'm the guy with the shaggy hairdo there, about 10 years old. I love this photo because we're all smiling together, and it's actually the only photo I could find of us where we're all smiling. I think it wasn't so easy to get us all smiling in the same photo. I also note that I did not comb my hair during this entire year because I have several photos from this year, and never was my hair combed. But the reason I show you this is because I grew up primarily with my mother. My parents divorced when I was 6 years old. My brother was 2 years old. And she was then charged with raising two unruly boys from then forward. And she, when she was married very young, I was born when she was just 20. So she did not finish school, college, and she did not have a steady job when when they were first divorced. So she needed to go back to school. She went back and got her occupational therapy degree, mostly at night. She worked during the day. She figured out how to make sure that my brother and I were dressed and fed and off to school, and that we had care for us when we came home. And throughout that time, we were on government assistance in the early years. My mom had a number of caregivers. We lived with another family for a while, but never did I feel less than. My mom somehow made it seem like we were just like anybody else, and that she moved us closer and closer into neighborhoods with better schools throughout my childhood. And I think to myself now, when I talk to her about what she had to carry on her back of getting a degree, working, caring for us, and we were not easy. My brother and I recognize with modesty now that we were difficult and demanding children. But the fact that we were able to do that and feel not less than and feel included at school, it's a remarkable achievement by her. She's now an occupational therapist, and she has her degree, and she had an amazing career. She retired, by the way, in Indiana. She's not far away in Fishers, and I was able to help her a little bit in her retirement, which was an honor for me. But I just want you to know that I stand here in front of you, in front of the screen, really, as someone who really was put here by the efforts and struggles of my mother, and to make it through in those really difficult times. And I feel very grateful to her for that. Let's move to the next one. This is my family today. That's you can see me in the hoodie. That's pretty typical wear for me today at work. This is, of course, during COVID. Down the other end of the table is my wife, Michelle, and then my two daughters, Alex and Emily. And Alex's boyfriend there is Grant with the fork and knife. I don't know, he's excited about his dinner. And then the other is Emily's roommate, Eunice, and Emily's boyfriend is taking the picture, Ryan. I love this photo because it shows one of the silver linings of this pandemic has been family time for us. We were able to, my two kids both live in New York City normally, both have jobs, which is worth a small celebration in its own right. They both have jobs and can pay for their own apartments. But during the pandemic, they left New York and came home and stayed with us for almost 3 months with these house guests. And so all day we'd all be on the internet in some form or the other, doing Zoom calls or something, and all of them doing the same thing. And then each evening we'd come and have dinner together, and it was like a small party each evening. And I don't know that I'll ever have a time like that again, but it was a really special time that we were all together like that. I'm very grateful for it. And anyways, family is very important to me, and just having this time with them was really remarkable. So let's move to the next one. My screen isn't moving. There it is. Next one is really my values. You'll probably recognize some of these from just the short stories I've told you about my background. I collected these from just some work I did with a leadership coach, trying to think about what matters most to me and how that contributes to my leadership. And this is really what I've come to, that this combination of hard work and justice and fairness as a value, wellness, trying to keep myself in the best mental and physical shape I can, so when I show up to people at work, I'm the best version of myself, because sometimes being tired and grumpy leads to less than perfect leadership. Having meaningful relationships and making sure I value those, making sure my work contributes to the world in a significant way, and making sure that I'm focusing on the real things, on truth, and not letting myself believe our own press or something. So those are the things that matter most to me. The hard work, probably you can see, came from my mom. She, her ability to value work and do work because it's what needs to be done, I think impacts me still today. Same with the justice and fairness. I've developed this basic thesis in my life that people all can achieve things, and they all have desires to live a full life and reach their potential. The question is whether they have the opportunity to do so. And for those of us that have power and have some kind of ability to affect the situation, we have a duty to try to make the world more fair and more just wherever we can, wherever our power can be used. And so that sort of stays in the back of my mind with every decision I make. I won't do more on these, but again, if people have questions about that when we get to it, I'm happy to talk about them. These values are really important in terms of how I think about how I lead on the most fundamental and basic decisions I make in the company. I wanted to start with a little bit of background about the company because it impacts how I want to talk about what we're doing during the pandemic. I also serve on the Business Roundtable, which is an organization of large company CEOs that often makes policy recommendations, talks to the government about things that we might want to do to promote better business conditions, et cetera. About a year ago, the Business Roundtable restated the purpose of business, which got a lot of attention in the press. Maybe many of you saw that, but the purpose of a corporation was changed from to serve your shareholders, essentially, to a stakeholder idea, like that we not only think we serve shareholders, we also think we serve customers, employees, suppliers, et cetera. And of course, for me, as a member of the BRT, I was really proud of that because Cummins has been thinking of our job that way for many years. As you know, we've had a stakeholder model really since Irwin Miller's time, where we say that these stakeholders are really what we're trying to serve in total. And the concept that we've always used is that we don't really need to choose which one's most important. We know that if we don't serve our shareholders well, it won't be up to us anymore. The shareholders will reject us and get some new managers who will serve them better. But we also know that we serve each stakeholder best by serving them all. We know that we can serve shareholders best if we have effective and strong relationships with the other stakeholders. If the communities think that we're an additive to the community as opposed to a taker, they'll allow us to operate, they'll promote our operations, we'll be able to source good people and good employees because the schools will be good. These are all things that will benefit the shareholders eventually, and oftentimes in very short and medium term as well. So that's our concept, that we serve each by serving all. And I think the Business Roundtable also wrote that in their purpose, which again, I thought was a really good step. One of the things I think that was misunderstood about that announcement is that it was somehow a change in how companies would behave. But what I noticed when I joined the organization is the vast majority were operating that way already. That it wasn't just Cummins that thought this way about stakeholder models. That they may not have named it this, but essentially most large companies now are thinking about their business in this way, in a way that says, of course, I have to take care of all these stakeholders if I expect my shareholders to succeed. And again, I think that just reflects how companies are operating today. And again, I encourage you, all of you, to make clear to your stakeholders that that's what you are doing as well. I think it's also worth noting that in this concept of stakeholder model, that there is a fairly strong debate going on right now about whether this model actually serves our country well. And here's the way I hear the debate. What I hear is debates about capitalism and whether capitalism actually is what the country wants, and if so, what form. And I have to admit, I'm fearful about that debate, not because I mind debates, I like debates, but what I see is a polarization in the country that is filled with name calling. Things like calling people greedy bankers or evil multinationals, or even the word CEO causes people to spit a little bit. They think CEOs are so greedy and terrible. And on the other side, socialist, that somehow socialist is an evil name for people. But the name calling, I think, doesn't add any quality to the debate. What I think we all need to recognize is that today, too many people are being left behind. That our system has created some of the greatest companies, the largest wealth of any nation in the world. That the capitalist system combined with our democracy in the US has produced a remarkable growth and prosperity for our country. But it's also left a lot of people behind. too many now. And I think that's why this debate is taking on such ferocity, is because as long as so many people are left behind, we won't be able to demonstrate that this system is good enough, and people will begin to tear it down. And my concern is as people start to tear it down, our opportunity as institutions, companies, educational institutions, healthcare institutions, we will no longer be able to serve our mission the best and most effective way. So I think we need to take notice of this. I don't think this is something happening on the side that we don't have to worry about. I think we need to understand, as we think through our stakeholders, how are we going to make sure that more people are included, or else the job will be taken away from us and somebody else will take it over. And I worry that somebody else will be authoritarians or other people who promise people good things but deliver very little. So let me switch my attention now to 2020, because all those things that I just mentioned to you have been going on for several years. I've been worried about them now for some time, this larger and larger group who don't feel included in American prosperity. And then COVID came and just exacerbated all those differences. So now, as we look around our country, we see the haves and have-nots experiencing more than just economic hardship. We see gigantic healthcare differences. I mean, the difference between a have and a have-not today can be the difference in life and death, because access to healthcare is so different. And even jobs. I know in our company, we're taking a lot of action, which I'll talk about in a minute, to make sure people are safe. But there are many people that are doing frontline jobs that are in harm's way every day. People working in retail outlets where customers will regularly come in. The sign says wear a mask, the people don't wear a mask, or they wear it down below their nose, and just expose the person across from them to germs with every interaction. So for those people that are on those frontline jobs, this pandemic is again putting their lives in jeopardy. Also, digital divide. We have, of course, the problem that many of us do not have access to high-speed internet, and therefore can't perform our jobs as well as others in this world where we're doing a lot of work from home or working on the internet. And it changes the roles of people. I'll just give you one story. We have a big operation in India, and we've made a remarkable progress in India, including women in our workforce. And that's been a big benefit to the company. We've been able to hire a number of very, very talented women from technical fields and others. In fact, we actually helped establish a women's technical college in India to include more women in education many years ago. Anyway, this idea of bridging the gender gap in India has made great progress for us. But now that people are working from home, expectations of women who were previously working are now to do much more care for their kids and for their parents and for the multi-generations that are living at home. And the parents don't understand that the woman actually has a job and will not really let her go work on the internet, work on her job, because it's not a real job if it's just online. So many of the women that work for us are finding it very, very difficult to actually keep working now that they're working from home. And I know that translates into a number of women working for us here in the US, where now more of the childcare responsibilities, more of the household responsibilities are falling to them now that they're not leaving home to go to the office. So the digital divide spans the gap. But all I wanted to highlight here is that all the issues that I raised about trying to ensure that more people are included and more people feel like our combination of capitalism and democracy, which I think, again, is the most successful system in the world, is under threat if we as leaders of institutions don't think right now with urgency how to include more people in it. If we don't start acting and thinking of this as our part of our job, we will regret it, is my view, and it will be turned over to others. Last thing I want to highlight to you before I open up for Q&A is that this is an opportunity for us today with COVID, and not just in this way of maybe we can think about how to help with policy to include more people. I mean, even inside our institutions. When we started working on how to keep people safe, we needed to, first of all, we had to shut down a lot of our facilities and operations and rethink how do we lay out our plants so that people could be spaced far enough apart and wouldn't exchange germs. We had to think about how to run our offices. So we shut a lot of offices and we put people working from home on Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all kinds of other systems. And of course, forced us all into be our own IT managers. But all these changes now have begun to move into almost every aspect of our business. We're looking at things like service training, where we used to call in technicians from all over the country from different distributors and dealers and customers to learn how to repair engines. We realized we can't do that anymore, so we started putting that service training online and training people online. And what we found out, of course, is that we could get more people in training class. We could train more people more quickly. They didn't have to travel, save them money, save them time. And we can bring more people up to speed in training now than we ever could in much shorter amount of time. So we will never go back. It will never return to the old way where we'll do service training back in one headquarters and everyone will fly there. And there's just dozens and dozens of opportunities like that, where we are looking at our company from the ground up to say, not to say that we want to do everything online. We don't. We still love the culture of the company and the interactions and the collaboration we have from having face-to-face. But we are re-looking at every single thing we do to say, how do we learn what we've learned in this pandemic, add it to what we know from what we did before to come up with a third way that's better than either of those old ways? How we office, how we work, what our processes are, how we interact with customers, every element will be a combination or a new way that takes advantage of what we learned during this period. And I say that to you to give you optimism and encouragement to not resist that. That you know, I know my kids that I've been now living with for a few months, they only shop at companies that understand how to do business online. They just refuse to go to people that are bricks and mortar only. So the more that we can recognize that the next generation of customers, the next generation of workers will demand that our companies understand how to do this well, I think will serve us all much better, and we will have a much better sustainability as organizations and much more success. So I guess my message to you is use this pandemic as an opportunity to revisit all those things and find a new way to do things now that you're forced to do it. It's a burning platform to get you going, but it will serve your institution well. So with that, Kathy, let me turn it back to you and for some Q&A. And I'm sorry my remarks were quick, but I think it's probably more interesting for people anyway to do a little bit more Q&A.
Thanks, Tom. Wow, really interesting and generating a ton of questions. So anyone online, if you want to chat some questions, we'll try to get to them. Let me start with a couple. You talked about this notion of COVID being an opportunity to reset. How long will that take? What does that look like?
Well, the one thing I would just say, first of all, is that when I first started to look at issues in COVID, which was all the way back in February, you know, we have a very large operation in China. So and in fact, our biggest location is Hubei province, where the pandemic started. And so we've been working on this for many, many months. But when it first started, I have to tell you that we knew almost nothing about how to protect ourselves and how to think through how to redo our business processes to succeed in this time. But now we know a lot more. And the first thing we know is that masks and distances work. So that's been a really, I mean, I know it's obvious and everyone knows it now and they're bored hearing about masks, but I would just tell you that knowing that masks and distancing work has been a huge help to figuring out how to organize our work and think differently about things. So now, as I think about it, I'm sort of planning for at least another year. I'm thinking to myself that I will be in some form of masks and distancing in all or part of my operation until approximately this time next year. Will it be exactly this time next year? No. And again, I've heard estimates that say it might be, maybe we'll have some part of our operations will be through vaccines and things maybe in the middle of next year. I've heard some people say longer than that, but I don't hear anybody telling me it'll all be fine by the end of the year. No one's saying that. So I'm thinking to myself, a year from now is kind of a milestone. And that's why I said to people, when you're thinking through about how to do this, it's not short term. That will mean we'll have been doing this for 2 years. So we might as well get used to it. Like, we might as well think to myself, how do I make the investments that I'm doing to deal with safety and things like that during the pandemic pay off for me in how I run my operations long run?
Yeah, pretty incredible. It seemed like way back when in March, we thought this was only going to be a few weeks. Well, I'll go home for a few weeks. We'll come back. Everything will be fine. And now, blink of an eye, we're talking about 2 years. So it's pretty incredible. How has Cummins used this stakeholder model through COVID?
Well, as you know, Kathy, stakeholder model's been around long before me, and it really impacts all of our thinking. It's very difficult to become a leader at Cummins unless you can understand the stakeholder model and think through the values implied by it. You just don't make it. Basically you get flushed out of the system early. So it's embedded in all the things we do. But I would say just a couple of examples is we definitely thought through not just what do we do with our employees, but what do we do in the community. So for example, we have a charitable foundation. So a lot of our philanthropy, we revisited and said, hey, what do we need to do urgently in the community to make sure people have masks and other things? We started working on that. We actually bought some machines early on to make some masks. We're now in production of masks. We started working on respirators with our filtration material. So of course we turned our attention to that in the philanthropy and that side. Also, though, it impacts how we think through our employees, trying to make sure that employees have what they need to be successful with us. It's not just about what's easy for the company, it's about what works for employees long run. So, and I think that served us well. I receive a lot of notes from employees about things they like and don't like, as you'd guess, and there are plenty of both. But one of the things I receive most often is people saying to me that they notice and feel the caring of the leaders during this time, and how grateful they are to work for a company that has that, because they know relatives and friends that are working for places where that feeling is not there, where they feel exposed and in danger, and that they don't feel the caring from their company. And again, in a time where you're anxious, like you don't know what to do and you have to wear a mask and that makes you feel really even weirder, that kind of care and concern goes a long way.
Well said. Thanks for that. So you spoke a bit about this, but a lot of us are thinking about when and how and if to bring our remote workers back. What are the biggest considerations? I know you mentioned distancing and masks, but what other considerations are there around your reopening your facilities in Indiana and around the world?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, it's obvious, but we kind of have safety first. And so we think through safety first, and then we kind of make the rest of the steps. And safety first means, can I distance and protect people, or can't I? If the answer is I can't, then I don't bring them back. If I can, then I will. And so I think office environment, plant, service environment, you name it, if you can't establish safe distances, you can't get away to people in masks and rely on people wearing masks, then we just can't bring them back. If we can, we can. And then again, most of our plants are open now, nearly all across the world. And the reason we're able to do that is because we were able to relay out our lines, sometimes at lower productivity, sometimes getting closer to full productivity. Again, nowhere is up to the optimum yet, but working our way back up. And by relaying out our lines, we did that. In engineering, we're back at work, and sometimes we're alternating. Sometimes people come in 3 days a week and the other people come in 2 days, and then we go back and forth because we couldn't find enough space in the office or test cell areas, so we had to space people out. So they're kind of half and half. Other areas like the administrative offices, we felt like we could do our work from home just as easily. So why come into a desk, put a mask on, and then work on Zoom? Like if half the people are going to be on Zoom, might as well have all the people on Zoom. It doesn't actually make it that much easier to have half and half. So we basically close the offices and are largely keeping them closed until we feel comfortable that we could bring back a large group. But in each case, we're saying is safety first. And then secondly, what tools and things do people need to be able to do their work effectively? If the tools they need are the essential tools are in the office, we need to figure out a way to bring them in part-time. And that means relaying out lines or relaying out offices so that we can do that all are full-time. And then if we think people can work from home, we're going to leave them home. And we did notice, by the way, that the cases that we get have as much to do with how much COVID is in the community as anything else. So when case rates are high in the community, we're more likely to be more conservative on our come back to work plan. When cases are really dropping in the community faster, then we'll be more open about our bring it back to work. And right now, cases in most of our locations in the US are still quite high.
It's a tough balancing act because you've got all these businesses, small businesses that support people being back at the office, especially restaurants and things like that. And so it's that balance between keeping your employees safe and at home and helping support the community at the same time. It's a difficult balancing act. Could you say a little bit more about your values, in particular? How do you see you contributing to the world?
Yeah, so the main thing that I think about with my values and my leadership is that if I have the opportunity to make things more fair and more just, and I talked a little bit about this, but my framework for that is helping people reach whatever their full potential is. I feel like I have a duty to do so. And so when I make decisions about how to proceed in business and whether or not we should invest more here or invest more there, I think about what the implications are to those that are impacted most. So if I can create more jobs that provide welfare for families, that feels like a real win to me. Like that's what I'm put here to do. If I have to make short-term decisions that say that I need to contract someplace and therefore I have to actually reduce workers. We did do that, by the way, when we closed plants. We had to lay off some number of workers. I think to myself, how quickly can I bring them back? How quickly can I restore the pay cuts? How quickly can I find ways to promote and build new? I do have to do it. There's no question that sometimes I need to make decisions which impact people in a bad way for some period of time in order to make sure that we survive and get on to the next phase. But I'm always thinking to myself, is the step that I'm taking good for me, good for the company, good for the institution, and good for those that I'm impacting? And I try to prioritize those most impacted first, not me first. And that's the way I try to think about it every time. And if I feel myself getting a little bit too inside myself, I just go visit. I go talk to the people that are most impacted and say, what do you think? And that brings them back right to me. Whenever I talk to my kids about my job, they really don't want to know about engines. They don't really want to know about how cool the Dodge Ram is. They really like to hear about the things that we're doing that are impacting people's lives positively. They care about the human aspects, and that just reminds me of what my real job is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of good lessons for all of us on this call to think about and maybe tweak how we're doing things. So thank you for that. When we think about Erwin Miller and Tim Salso and Joe Lokri and now previous CEOs of Cummins and now you and your great leadership, what is the secret sauce? I mean, you talked about the stakeholder model. And you talked about, if people can't get behind that, there's, they will not, make it to the leadership team. Can you say a little bit more about that? Because it is fascinating and it is really particular to Cummins.
Well, I'm not, I think that I see a really remarkable leaders at many organizations. I appreciate the compliment. I do see a lot elsewhere that I also think I can emulate. But I would just say this, that the thing that I am grateful for is that my own leadership development was a priority of Tim Solso and Joe Lokri. And their leadership development was a priority of Jim Henderson and Henry Schacht. And before him, Henry Schacht's development was a priority of Erwin Miller's. So the common element is developing leaders is critical to the success of the institution. Is Tim's famous quote, that at least quote that I use a lot, I don't know how famous it is, famous to me, is that there are no such thing as good companies or great companies without great leaders. So great leaders are created, not born. Yes, you have some traits inside you, but you develop them to bring out those traits and help them express those traits. And those two, Tim and Joe, invested a lot in me, a lot of hours in helping me learn how to do things, learn how to think about things. They provided me a leadership coach to help me with self-awareness, which was some of the most important work I did was on self-awareness and emotional intelligence. But they enabled that. And now I'm doing the same thing. I spend 2 days every 4 to 6 weeks, and then another week every quarter. So it's something like, you can figure that out, 15% of my time in rooms helping develop leaders for executive positions. So I sit there and I train them in self-awareness. I train them in thinking about team leadership and thinking about how to ensure that their values are aligned with the company, and even thinking through things like how they interact with investors and other stakeholders. So that investment by me is basically a payback for the investment in me, to make sure that the leaders that follow me have the same just the same investment in their leadership specifically. So I think it's not an accident, I guess, is what the shorter answer to your question is.
Yeah, well, thank you. And again, some notes we can all take here and think about for our leadership teams too. So you and I spoke last night, and I told you I'd be reviewing the chats, and not sure if you would be willing to take a political question. So if you
Go
don't,
ahead, bring it on. Bring it on.
How will your strategy for the business change with the results of the next election, depending on who becomes president?
Sorry, you froze there for a second, which was my thing, not yours. Can you just do the question one more time?
Yes. Depending on the outcome of the election, because the presidential election, because the candidates are so different from each other, how will a Cummins business strategy change based on the outcome?
Sorry, Kathy, you froze. My system went unstable there. You had a question about how I would, what our company would, what would be different if the president election went one way or the other. Is that right? Is that what the first one was?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be a lot of change for us, to be honest. You and I have talked many times about this, but my view is that as the CEO of Cummins, I get to have my own political views, but that's not my job as a CEO of the company. My job as CEO of the company is we are ready to express our points of view about things that impact our communities and our people. And that's kind of how we think about it. And we think both parties have good things to bring and some not so good things with regard to policy that affects our company and our community. So we are thinking about the things that matter most to us, irrespective of who's elected president. So again, I don't mean to dodge the question. That is actually my real answer. And that's the way I think about it. I have my own personal views. And as you and I discussed, if we have a virtual cocktail hour, we can talk about what those are, but those really are not related to what I'm trying to prioritize as a CEO. Right. Thanks for revisiting that. I apologize for the freeze there.
No problem.
What was your next question?
Next question. Have you actively worked to increase diversity with members of your C-suite? Which is an interesting question because you have a very diverse C-suite. So.
Yeah. The answer though is yes, Kathy. I mean, let me just say it as concretely as I can. the company has worked on diversity for many, many years. And we have done, I think, some really good things in that regard. We've definitely advanced gender in our company and done a really good job with that. We've also done a lot more work internationally to make sure we're including people from different countries in our thinking, which is critical to our strategy. And we've done stuff on US diversity, on racial diversity. But I will tell you that my reflection on our work on racial diversity is that we have not done as well as we should. And that frankly, as we broadened our focus in diversity, we lost ground in the very basic levels of racial diversity in the US. And again, not on purpose, not because we don't care about it, but because we just lost ground. And I just think there's not a more important issue for companies today to ask themselves, why is it that their boardrooms, why is it that their executive suites don't have, that we have more CEOs named John than we have women CEOs, and why we don't have more racial diversity in those locations. There just is no excuse for it. It's just time to address it. That's the way I feel about it, and I feel like a person who owns that, frankly. So we are making significant moves in that regard. We just did some new officer announcements where we made some significant moves there. Officers are vice presidents at our company. We will be making announcements at the boardroom as well. And we, my own view is our board will not be right until it's half women and that it's racially diverse in line with our population. And it's not about filling quotas. It's about ensuring that we're finding the best talent and producing the best result, which I think you do when you include everybody. You get the best talent and you get the best result. It's evidenced at every level of our company and every kind of team. And frankly, I just hold myself and our executive team accountable for where we are in terms of successes and where we aren't in terms of not enough focus.
Yes, thank you. Well, and thanks for your willingness to answer those questions. I know they're difficult.
It's my pleasure.
One last question, and I'm bouncing us back to COVID. How should we think about preparing for the next pandemic? Is there anything you will or we should be doing different next time?
It's a great question, and I'm actually wondering it myself. So I'll give you an answer, but I want to give it with the modesty and caveat it deserves. That for us, that for me, I feel like our company was not properly prepared for this one. And frankly, when things got bad, we had inadequate cleaning supplies. We didn't have a good. We have very, very extensive preparations for emergencies and making sure that if the plant goes down, we know we have an exact procedure for everything to do for floods and fires, and we didn't have one for this. And despite the fact that there was a lot of evidence out there from a lot of scientists that this was inevitable, that there would be some, maybe not this wide, but there'd be some spread of some virus, we didn't get ready. So I think what I've noticed about this is that our brains are prepared, are ready to make preparedness for things we've already experienced, and we're really bad at thinking about things that we've never experienced. So what I've been doing with our risk management is thinking to ourselves, I want to build out scenarios for things that we've never experienced and say to ourselves, what would that look like? And please give me the worst case. Don't give me the best case, give me the worst case. And then I don't have to do all those things, but at least I have an idea of what it might mean. So my encouragement to everybody else just watching our experience, our thinking here is, don't limit your response or your preparedness work to the things that have already happened to you or to your neighbor. Think about the things that you haven't seen yet, but that people are saying could happen. For example, we've got fires in California. We don't have so many fires in Indiana. What if we did? What would they look like? So just be thinking about what could happen that hasn't happened yet, and what would I do? That's my suggestion.
Well said. Tom, thank you so much. It was very interesting. I took a lot of notes, and I'm sure everyone else did too. Today's presentation will be available online at economicclubofindiana.com. Please join us next month on Monday, October 5th, to hear from Indiana University President, Dr. Michael McRobbie. And please register for this virtual event on our website. Information for each of this season's presenters can be found on economicclubofindiana.com. And thank you all, and have a wonderful afternoon.